Welcome to Muddy River News, furnished by Harvey's. I'm Bob Goff. Quincy, of course, being a Mississippi River town, has seen its share of ups and downs with the tide of the rivers from floods and such. But lately, it's kind of been an underutilized area. But that might be changing soon. And one of our local experts on the Mississippi River is my guest today, Mike Klingner with Klingner & Associates. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Well, I think there's a lot of great stuff to talk about, a lot of good momentum, but I think the first thing to talk about is the Quincy Bay Project. Cubera is what it's been named, but that project is going to really open up a lot of doors for the entire Quincy riverfront, correct?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this thing kick off. We had a kickoff meeting just last week with the Corps of Engineers and finally seen some progress. Cubera we organized in 2010, but it's something we've been pushing for a couple of decades before that to finally get something to happen.
And it's a lot of money, right?
Oh yeah. and it could be a lot more depending on what actually comes out of the final planning.
So what are we talking about now cost-wise, and what's this going to go toward?
Well, the scope of work that was originally set up was around that $25 million range, but they really kind of opened the door a little bit. It actually looks more positive in that they kind of expanded the geographical area. Initially, it was from the old railroad bridge that goes on to Quincy Bay Island north, but the current map that you're using actually take us to the low end of the district of the area, which includes that big pound of that sand we see right in the middle of the lower part of the bay by the entrance into the marina, and that wasn't included initially. So that's a pretty big piece if we can get some of that work done as well.
And full disclosure, I was a member of the Quincy Park Board and the president of the Park Board as we started kind of trying to gain some momentum on this, and that was a very key thing because the marina has certainly had its issues. But if we can get that part taken care of as part of this, that's going to be huge because it just opens up the entire recreational area, and it's also key to remember that we're going to talk about the Quincy Riverfront directly where Clad Adams and Hampshire Street are, but this is a separate project. The Cubera project is the northern part of the bay, but the down south is going to get a little benefit.
Right. And what we really make sure there's the distinction is that the Cubera project is funded for habitat. So it's really looking at what the habitat needs and deeper backwater for fish during the winter. There's a lot of things, of course, we've lost almost all of the depth. The upper part of the bay is only about a foot deep, in some places less. Middle part of the bay is 2 to 3 feet deep, but at one time it was deep enough to water ski all the way through there. So we've lost a lot of depth, and about the only thing that's surviving, it seems like to be, is Asian carp. We need to get the additional depth so we can get the native species back in there, get the wintering, and actually make it more suitable for different types of habitat, not just what we're seeing today. And
but the what will happen with the marina and the recreational aspect of it, that can be a nice byproduct.
Yeah, that's right. It's secondary benefits of the project, but the project is designed for habitat and to reduce the amount of sediment load that's coming in. So the original scope of work that was kind of set up in the '87 plan that the Corps did with Illinois DNR and the water surveys out of Champaign was to look at 3 different areas of work. One was to do this dredging, but to be able to preserve that so it was resilient, to create a series of islands off the end of the lower part of Indian Grave District to reduce the amount of flow and high water flow that comes in. Their analysis said about 70% of the sediment load comes from flooding conditions. Water gets in during muddy flooding conditions, and then it gets behind the railroad bridge and other areas of the island, and it just slows the flow down, and then the sediment deposits. So we've had that situation with high water. And then another major factor has been the cut-through. The cut-through in that original study was saying that's about 22% of the problem was the sediment was coming through, but I think it's actually worse now. When that study was done, the depth at the entrance was about 20 feet deep. Now it's closer to 30 feet. And we can see all the sand coming in, which is the lower part by the marina entrance. Right. That's all coming from some of the dredging activities the Corps done. And instead of putting it on hogback, they've put it back in the river, and then we end up getting it in the bay. So certainly needs to be some modification to that cut through as part of the project.
Will it be closed, or will the flow sort of just be slowed down?
Well, actually several years ago, as I mentioned, this thing has been identified as a problem for decades. Congressman Evans got several studies done to look at modifying the cut through, where they would put riprap stone into about 6 foot depth at a flat pool. So instead of being 20 or 30 feet deep, it'd just be 6 feet deep, so you can still get boats through it, and put a small weir in the front of the cut through, so it's more of a backwater flow instead of water coming directly in the same direction as the channel. So that would significantly reduce the sediment load, but still allow boats to come through. And I know, talking to Rome, the current executive director of the Quincy Park District, he would like to see some flow maintained, because he feels like that provides some flow to keep that channel open in front of the marina. So secondary benefits, but also, I think also for habitat too, to have some flow through the area.
So when this project is underway and the construction, if you will, and all the dredging, does that mean we're going to get a remodification of hogback as well?
Well, we hope so. We kind of hinted that, hey, instead of putting that sand back in the water somewhere to save money, why don't you put it back on hogback, or else put it on the levee district so they can improve their levees.
Sure.
They could stockpile it. They do that so close to Hannibal at South River. They get a big stockpile. Gregory District gets a stockpile. Why don't you put a stockpile of sand on any grave instead of putting it there, and then they can use it for levee maintenance and levee repair rather than putting it back in the river. So you're not pumping it twice. And so that's really something that may come out of this, again, as a secondary benefit.
Well, that's great, and that, again, this can be the catalyst for the other projects we're going to talk about, such as, what could happen with the riverfront proper, if you will, which is Clyde Adams Park and where the Quincy Water Plant currently is. I know that is also well underway. That master plan is in progress. Where are we on this project?
Well, on the riverfront project, we're very excited. It worked out pretty well during the pandemic. Instead of having public meetings, to actually have through the Zoom meetings, and we had great participation. We had over 1,000 people participate and do the questionnaire and see what they would like to see. Typically, when you're doing studies and you have the open meetings, you might get 50, 60 people to show up. But actually, I think we got better participation from the community by doing it by a series of Zoom meetings, and kind of came up with a community plan. That was the idea. And one of the things that came out of that was to have a dock for the cruise boats that are coming through. We're already seeing interest for the Viking Cruise Line, for example, that comes to Hannibal to have visits to Quincy by bus. Well, it'd be nicer to have them come in and dock here, and that creates quite a bit of revenue stream into our local businesses. So one of the projects, and that would be on the Quincy owned property, not the Park District property, where they're redoing the water plant, which again, all these things kind of tie together. That's going to open up some land along the river that's not currently available, but will be in the next few years, to have a courtesy dock, or have a dock for these cruise line boats. And then also we're looking at a courtesy dock for traveling boats, the smaller boats, kayaks and other things, and that are using the river and stop at the restaurants and things. So trying to get more people coming in using the river. We've kind of lost hogback in some of that traffic, and people used to go up to LaGrange and use the restaurants there and everything. Now we want to see, hey, we've got some nice restaurants right at the riverfront now. Let's try to provide better access to those. And,
well, we could also use a trolley to go up Harrison to Hampshire to get up to this square.
That's another project. Some of those tracks are still there. Get what Quincy used to have in the 1920s. But there's a lot of opportunities once you get that together. And of course, one of the things that kind of was a stimulus for this whole project was IDOT's plan to put a new bridge at York Street. So by having a new bridge at York Street, what do you do with the old Quincy Bridge? Well, part of the input that we're getting from the community, well, can we keep at least part of it as an abutment and have that as a view between the two bridges, and also have as a ramp to come down to the riverfront, so make it easier. So maybe have more of a pedestrian access and mall area from the riverfront, tying in with a ramp to that abutment on the Quincy Bridge, and carry that up Main Street. we need some new hotels along the river. Can this be a stimulus? Hotels want to be where there's people,
right,
and where there's an attraction. And so if we can get more of this in place, it's going to be very, very nice. I think a stimulus for the whole community.
What with the new bridge now, what's the timeline on that possibly?
Well, they were originally saying 10 years. Of course, now they're putting a lot of money in the old bridge again. But I think it's going to depend on funding, and if this infrastructure bill goes through, that'll hopefully be some more money. Even though if this repair work, if that lasts 6 or 10 years, it's something you need to be planning to get this new bridge in place anyway. So, and they've got some preliminary locations. The Stowler Bridge and things have been announced. Already done a lot of the flow analysis actually for the new bridge at York Street. And of course, with the traffic study that's been done, change the 3rd and 4th Street couple, and maybe have a roundabout there on 4th Street coming off of York, and turn 4th Street back into a more friendly two-way street versus the way it is now, and just make it more friendly downtown for around the district.
And the other thing that I think is key is the fact that to take that, we have that interstate truck traffic that comes through, to get it going to York Street is easier access for them to go south to ADM, Gardner's, and all the other places they need to go as well.
Right. So keep that on 3rd Street, back to Broadway, and be able to make that loop and not get on 4th Street.
And then that goes on to expand down to the possibility of, I guess, 57, which could, that's also something that's up there. But again, a lot of these things that have to happen, it is a bit of a domino, isn't it? One thing has to go, one thing has to go, because again, when you're talking about state funding, it's not like that's readily available. So we all have to kind of wait on things.
Yeah, and one thing that our mayor would like to do is, and has already started the process, is to get a not-for-profit, similar to what we do with the Friends of the Trail, to support the trail system, to have that in place. And I think Hal Oakley's been working on that as well, to get all the paperwork in place to have a 501(c) for the riverfront development, so we can start taking donations, to have a component of grants and local funding and donations to help spur some of these improvements.
And again, when we're talking to the river, and we all, again, habitat's great, recreation's great, but once again, we're also, the commerce on the river is what's so important. The goods that go up and down the river, and how they then go from the river to the shore, to the trucks, to the trains. The port authorities are also part of that as well.
And we've had some great progress here in the last year. Retired Colonel Sinkler, who was a Rock Island District Colonel around the 2008 time period, and the 2008 flood, and very helpful in getting that moved. He noticed that for some reason Rock Island wasn't getting the funding that St. Louis got, for example. And after doing a little research, he was seeing that the Upper Mississippi was not getting the credit for the amount of tonnage that we actually have coming this way. For some reason, St. Louis was claiming that credit, and nobody was complaining, and said he saw what was going on and kind of brought that to attention. Hey, we need to make sure that the ports here are getting the appropriate credit. So he has done that. He's put together what's called the Corn Belt ports. So you had the Mid-America Intermodal Authority Port District, which is on the Illinois side, and the Mid-America Port Commission, which is a 3-state that was put together. Art Tenhouse and I worked on that back in the late 90s. So it's been sitting there, not really been that active, and also been put up the ideas around the Quad Cities with the ports we have there, and on the Illinois River in the Peoria area. And with those 3 areas, we're actually in the top 50 ports in the entire United States. And actually, just by itself, the Mid-America is in the top 50 port of the United States. That wasn't being recognized. We weren't getting credit for that tonnage. And just a tremendous tonnage comes in. We get loaded at the Quincy dock, but also ADM, is a big player in what's actually coming up and down that river in a lot of different modes. They're bringing in oils from all over the world to process here in Quincy, and also a lot of beans and things coming down the river. And you've got Ursa Co-op, who has purchased a lot of those elevators, and they're using the river. And so 60% of the nation's corn and beans goes down that river, and most of that's coming from the Upper Valley, and we weren't getting credit. So the idea is, by showing the amount of tonnage, will that be a stimulus to push the navigation improvements that was authorized in 2007, called NESP, Navigation Ecosystem and Sustainability Project, and that was authorized in 2007, but has been funded. So We think that it's actually going to be funded this year to actually start the construction, starting at 25, and then of course already a little bit of work's been done at some of the Peoria and LaGrange locks there, but actually start and move up. And of course, Quincy is kind of right in the middle of over $2 billion worth of work for these lock and dam expansions. So we're in really an ideal situation if this all moves forward to actually make our locks not just the 600-foot lock it is now, but when those locks were made back in the 1930s, the Corps at that time had a pretty good foresight. Let's make another area there that could actually be another lock and make those 1,200 feet. And then the barges don't have to break down.
And when you, again, just that number, 60% of the country's corn and beans go by this area. And I think when you talk about that and people talk about government spending or whatever, and don't get me wrong, I have my says on that, my opinions on that as well, but something like this, which is so vital to a public-private partnership and making that kind of access so we can get those goods here, and so you can take somebody like ADM, again, who can their headquarters in our state, we've had this major presence there for years, to say that, okay, this is vital to us, this is important, we're going to put money into our facilities here, we're going to put jobs in here. That's the kind of thing that people really need to look at and say, this is where government and private industry can work together.
Right. Very good investment. A great return on the dollar. It's just sometimes our federal government doesn't make the best decisions. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Shocking.
But this is a no-brainer. The return is huge.
Well, I seem to remember a few years ago back when a certain former congressman was running for election, and we thought we were going to get this money, that one of the Tiger grants or whatever, and it mysteriously went back up to Moline, and we didn't get the money. It was kind of like, well, what are we doing here,
There's a little bit of politics going on.
People were like, we got this is by the Tiger grant was something that we're going to get it every year, and then it's like, okay, we're really going to get it. And then it didn't happen. So when politics come into play, but the nice thing about that is that the Cubera group, when you talk about having to deal with Springfield and Washington, actually work was made there where Senator Durbin's people were involved, and they were very key in us getting the Quincy Bay Project off. And that sort of impetus also just needs to play into projects like the Corn Belt ports, so we can look at it and say, okay, this is not pork, if you will. Yeah. This is something that's going to be a true benefit to our region. Now, of course, one guy's pork is always another guy's necessity and vice versa. But when you can state these cases for this thing, like you've done for years on river issues, I think that's important, and I think it's credible. And again, it's something that, it's not... It's not sexy. I mean, the riverfront's something, and having the recreation on the riverfront, and having you've got people down there for festivals and things, that's great. But other things like the Quincy Bay and like the ports, those are the things that, okay, these things are going to be of a major economic impact to our area.
Right. No, it's pretty exciting. A lot of things are kind of coming together. And so we hope in the next 3 or 4 years we'll really see some of these things come about. We'd like to see this cruise line port develop here in the next few years. The Cubera project will kick off. Unfortunately, they got to study it for a couple of years, but then once they start work, we are in that first 5-year package of projects. So we really do anticipate, in 2 or 3 years, we'll actually see some of the construction take place and some of those projects initiate, and certainly on the riverfront, seeing a lot of excitement there. We're already seeing some of the local contractors seeing an interest in these downtown buildings.
Sure.
And, starting seeing the interest in residential here, and condos and more little storefronts.
So a lot of things you're going to buy the big dirt spot there on the front street between Native and Chicks, right?
Yeah, we'll finally see something there. Hopefully see something big there.
You just got to write the check.
Yeah, all you got to do. Well, that's what we come to you for. Yeah. But no, a lot of opportunity, and you can donate.
Sure, absolutely.
Once we get this set up, there'll be a Quincy Riverfront fund that can donate, and we've been very lucky. Quincy has been great in supporting a lot of some of the projects that's pushed forward here, and a lot of people are very generous, and so we look forward to the opportunity to kind of blend some of that grant money in with some donations and make some things happen on the riverfront. The good thing about the Cubera project, that's 100% federal. And like I said, Durbin's been very supportive of that. We're seeing some real, as well, of all of our congressmen have, and so really see some things move forward there. And that's going to be the first thing that kicks off. But I think the riverfront's going to be coming along right with it.
All right. Well, Mike Klingner, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have now for Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. Have a great week.